This month on Exploring Wine Regions, we're going to be discovering the liquid gold that comes out of France in the region of Sauternes. So Sauternes is one of my favorite lesser known regions of Bordeaux. Bordeaux being one of the most well-known regions in France, known for its amazing Cabernet and Merlot-based blends coming from the Medoc and from the right banks areas such as Pomerol and Saint-Emilion. But a little bit further up the river, you can actually find the region of Sauternes, or as it's often known as Sauternes-Barsac. This area makes a unique blend of white wines that are always sticky and sweet, known as some of the finest dessert wines in the world. For instance, producers like Chateau Yquem fetch some multi-hundred, sometimes even $1,000 bottles just for these amazing dessert wines. This, located on the left bank of Bordeaux, are mostly sandy and limestone soils. So you're going to get a different and more unique minerality than some of the other stuff that you see from the left bank, which is mostly sand and gravel stone. Now, when you look at what are the grapes of Sauternes, you have to think three grapes: Semillon, Sauvignon Blanc, and Muscadel. Semillon is known for producing very rich, very high in apricot flavored wines, and usually is the varietal that adds most of the richness and sweetness to the blend in Sauternes, balanced out often by Sauvignon Blanc, which tends to produce a little bit more like honeysuckle and more tart fruit flavors, because Sauvignon Blanc will add a little bit more lift and acidity. And often you'll see small percentages of another varietal called Muscadel blended in. Muscadel will add more floral and more texture to these wines as part of the blend. And what makes these wines sweet? Well, none of these varietals are sweet naturally. What ends up happening in Sauternes is, because of their location right on the riverbank and because of the moisture that is always available from the river, there'll be lots of fog that enters these vineyards, creating a noble rot, which infects the grapes and pulls out lots of the water, concentrating the sweetness, acidity, and flavor profiles of these grapes. This creates a unique texture and flavor for all of these wines, adding that amazing honey and yeasty and brioche flavors that you get in Sauternes, especially when you've let it age for a few years. Now, what do you have with these kinds of wines? A lot of people don't really know what to do with their dessert wines. Sometimes they find them a little too sweet to drink by themselves. I find they're wonderful to drink by themselves, but if you wanted to have them with something, one of the best recommendations people like to do is do blue cheese. So you get that really salty, savory component coming from the blue cheese, balanced off by that fruity and sweetness coming from the Sauternes. Or you can do fruity desserts. So things with lots of fruit flavors or even custards will go really well with Sauternes. Now, if you want to do something a little bit more unique and pair it with your main courses, you can do something like spicy foods. So Southeast Asian dishes that have lots of spice, lots of intensity of heat. That heat will actually be balanced out by the sugar. So usually those foods are very difficult to pair with wine, but they actually go really well with sweet wines, and Sauternes are amongst some of the sweetest wines you can get. And finally, one of my favorite things to pair with Sauternes is to do more salty dishes. Something like foie gras, which has a good amount of saltiness and earthiness, is a really well-known pairing. But one of my favorite pairings to do is to find a higher acid vintage of Sauternes and actually get like a nice ribeye or another fattier cut of steak. Use lots of sea salt on it, and that really high level fat and high level salt that you have on that steak will be balanced out by the beautiful acidity and that sweetness of Sauternes. Very unusual pairing, but honestly one of my favorite pairings I've ever had. So if you liked these wines or you're intrigued by them, make sure you click below to explore some of the wines that we have and use the code Sauternes this month to get 15% off on any of the bottles.